Hey y'all, howdy. Welcome to One for the Books. I'm Sandra Broadwell and I am at my father-in-law's house for the 4th of July. I tried to film outside, but it is muggy as hell out there. And within like the first 20 seconds of filming, I was like literally dripping. So we're doing the best we can indoors today. Welcome to my June wrap up. I read 6 books in the month of June and a lot of pages. I think almost 4,000 pages, which is like a really, really big month for me. But it doesn't seem like it because I still only read 6 books because like I think 3 of the books that I read were over 1,000 pages by themselves. Or at least close to that. And that's because I finished The Dandelion Dynasty by Ken Liu this month. So I read The Grace of Kings, which is book 1, last month in May. I also started The Wall of Storms in May, but finished it in June. So book 2 of The Dandelion Dynasty is The Wall of Storms, and I loved this book. I'm just amazed by Ken Liu's world that he has built, the islands of Dara. There's not necessarily like magic in the traditional like fantasy sense, but the magic, where the magic system would take place in a fantasy world, is kind of replaced by engineering and ingenuity by these characters. So in a lot of ways it reads like a hard sci-fi but still giving fantasy, which I think is a really fun combo. The story is just meticulous and smart all the way down. I really loved some of the new characters that were introduced in The Wall of Storms, particularly Zomi. I was also surprised how little some of the main characters from the first book actually had page time in this book, but that's kind of the vibe for the rest of the story in general. So Kunigaru was the main character in book 1, and the rest of the books, although Kuni is obviously still a major part of it because it is focused on the Dandelion throne, it is a lot about what happens to his children and the political spheres around the Dandelion throne following that. But yeah, absolutely loved The Wall of Storms. It was a feat of a novel for sure. On the other hand, The Veiled Throne was definitely, this is book 3, the second book that I read in June, is by far the weakest book in this series. I ended up only giving this one a 3.5 stars after giving the first 2 books 5 stars. And that's just because it went off on a side quest for like several hundred pages of this book. It focused on, I think, kind of the least important character in the Dandelion Dynasty, the youngest daughter of Kunigaru. And it's kind of like a Food Network style restaurant food competition. Like that's where this book goes for like a couple hundred pages. And again, it's like, it's still like, it's over 1,000 pages long, so it's not like it's the whole book, but I was just like so baffled why we spent so much time on this food competition. And like, I get it after reading the final books, like why, but I just don't think it was the right call. It felt like a cozy fantasy novel was shoved into the middle of this epic fantasy novel. I think if this had been like a separate novella that was just that, I think I would have really loved it and found it to be like really cozy and cool and like a different aspect of this. But there are like huge empire toppling things happening and like really intense political things out in the wider world, and I'm like, I want to know what those things, like what's going on out there. Like I'm having a really hard time caring about this food thing. So for me, this one was just a little bit of a miss. I still loved all of the characters. I loved the machinations, like the scale of it is just really, really cool. But this one was just a little too side quest. The third book I read in June, which was the final book of the Dandelion Dynasty of the 4-book series, was Speaking Bones. This one I thought much improved from book 3. I didn't love it as much as the first 2 books in the series, but I still think I gave it like a 4.5, definitely a 4. And this one, just because like the pacing was a little all over the place, and maybe it's because I read these books like back to back to back that I was just getting kind of tired of Ken Liu's style. But basically like we would build up to an exciting thing, and then as soon as the exciting thing started to happen, we would cut to a whole chapter where we explained the engineering behind the mechanisms they were used to make the exciting thing happen. And that just, I don't know, again, like maybe this was happening throughout the whole series and it just like took that long for me to get tired of it, or I don't know if it was like a different way he was structuring it in the last book. But yeah, at that point I was just like, okay, like I get it. Like we have cool engineering things happening. Let's get back to the exciting part, which is the plot. I still really had a good time with it, but it was not the like banger of the first 2 books that I got out of it. I do like, I know I've been complaining a little bit, but I do want to say just like how amazing I think the world of Dara is. I was super along for the ride. I think obviously evidenced by the fact that I read all 4 of these books within the span of a month, even though I think 3 of the 4 of them are over 1,000 pages long. Like I was very along for the ride. I felt like the fate of the characters of the House of Dandelion was completely unpredictable, which made it really exciting. When they were in danger, I was afraid. And it was just so heartbreaking to watch these characters strive for years, building up these things, and then to have it all ripped away from them time after time after time. So heart-wrenching, just watching everything they built toppled. But it's not bleak. It ends, I think, on a very good note for the characters, the ones that made it to the end. And I even perhaps teared up a little bit at the conclusion to the story. It was very sweet, and I definitely will be thinking about this series for a long time after finishing the books. Okay, after the Dandelion Dynasty, I went for something quick and snappy, and that is Margo's Got Money Troubles by Rufi Thorpe. This was a brand new release for last month, and I picked it up because I had a in real life friend that read it and like raved about it on Goodreads, and I was like, oh, okay, that sounds pretty fun. Basically, this book is about a 19-year-old girl named Margo who is going to community college, and she gets knocked up by one of her professors. She makes a lot of poor decisions, but she is basically on her own. Her mother was a Hooters waitress, and her father was a professional wrestler who was never around in her life. And so she really doesn't have any sort of parental guidance, and she's just trying to make things work on her own. She decides to keep the baby, and after the baby is born, she's really struggling for money, and she decides to start an OnlyFans account, which, if you're unfamiliar, is like kind of soft porn. It goes a lot into like her family. Her dad he moves in with her, and then he starts like kind of coaching her and helping her figure out how to create an internet personality that people can really get behind and really make a success of herself. And it really talks a lot about society's expectations of mothers, of what it means to be a sex worker, and what people think of that. It talks about like how people judge her, like the falling out that she has with some of her friends from high school because of this, and how ashamed her mother is of her. It just goes through some like really hard things. And at the same time, Margo is just kind of unflinching about it. She is really just down to earth and just trying to do the best that she can for herself and her child. I was really worried going into this book that this story would rely too much on kind of hot mess mama type of tropes, which I absolutely can't stand. It's like why I bounced so hard off of the Finlay Donovan series, but this wasn't like that at all. I also think this had the potential to be like a manic pixie dream girl type thing with Margo's character, but it wasn't like that at all. She was quirky and cool, but not in a like annoying or overly dramatic way. She was just a very unique character and really refreshing. Even though my life and Margo's life have absolutely nothing in common, I found myself really relating to her. I wanted to give her a hug. She went through so many hard things, but she just had this really encouraging attitude the entire time. The focus of this book, like the deeper themes, are about how society treats moms, how society treats sex workers, how society judges you for how you share yourself on the internet. And it just cuts with a lot of sharp edges, and I thought Margo was a really snappy, cool character, and it was absolutely bingeable and a delight to read. I read it in a single day. So I would really highly recommend this book. It was my most surprising book of the year on my mid-year book freakout tag, and absolutely would love to see more people picking this up. The fifth book I read this month was Mirrored Heavens, which is book 3, the final book Between Earth and Sky series, which started with Black Sun. I absolutely loved Black Sun when I read it last year. One of the best first books in a fantasy series I've ever read. Fevered Star, the second book, was not quite as exciting, but I still really enjoyed it. And I think this one got right back up to the quality of the first book. It didn't have that like kind of exciting countdown aspect of the first book, but that was kind of something that you could only pull off once in a series, I think. But book 3 was incredible. It was super gripping and exciting. I read it really quickly. It was definitely not perfect. Like I wasn't 100% satisfied with the way everything went down, but that's just because I always want better for the characters. And you know, not all of them got to have like the super happy ending that I would have hoped for, but I do think that it had a great ending overall. I absolutely love Rebecca Rotenhorse's writing, and I will definitely be picking up more of her backlist in the future. I can't wait to see what she does now that this series is complete. Tons of pulse-pounding moments and great payoff for the characters. The final book that I read in the month of June was The Truth of the Aleke by Moses Ozayotomi. This is book 2 of the Forever Desert, which started with The Lies of the Ajungo. This is a novella series. I believe it's going to be a trilogy based on the author's note at the end. They can totally be read in either order. That I think the author intended that they don't have to be read chronologically, but it does, I think, make more sense if you read them chronologically, because the second book definitely has a lot of references to the first book. The first book, The Lies of the Ajungo, felt a lot like a folk tale, or kind of a prequel almost. It felt like a mythology. And this book did not feel that way, and it was very bleak. Like, please never take me to the Forever Desert. It is not a happy place. This one follows a young man who lives in a city in the Forever Desert, and he really wants to become one of these kind of elite soldiers that kind of defend the city from the Ajungo, who live out in the desert and occasionally raid his city. Through circumstances, he does get to train and become one of these soldiers, but it's not what he expected, and it doesn't go the way that he imagined it would. And I don't want to really say any more than that, because again, it's a novella. But yeah, this one was a tough read for the character. Like, I felt really bad for him. It seems like these two books have kind of been doing all of the world building for, I think, the story that the author really wants to tell, which is whatever the third one is going to be. Based on the author's note, it sounds like it's going to be a lot different, but a total banger. So I'm very glad I've already read these 2 novellas, and I'll definitely be picking up the third one when it comes out. So those were the 6 books that I completed in the month of June. I also read probably 150 more pages of Don Quixote after realizing how far behind I was. I talked about that a little bit in my mid-year book freakout tag, but now it's July. I've put down Don Quixote again to start the 3rd book of the Stormlight Archive series, which is Oathbringer by Brandon Sanderson. So that'll be in my July wrap-up. I can't wait. I'm already really loving it. And yeah, let me know what your favorite read was of the month of June, or what you're most excited to read for the month of July. Thanks so much for tuning in and hanging out with me for a little bit today. As always, please be kind, read books, and hit the subscribe button down below for more bookish content to come. I'll see you again soon.